Hey everyone, Vince Giordano, Juniata County Library. Ask us anything. Last time I talked about how we decide what items to buy or add to the library collection. And today I wanted to explain how we decide what items to remove from our library collection. We have over 50,000 items, physical items, on our shelves at any given point. And to get that state aid of $70,000 that I explained the other day, one of the requirements is that we have to have at least 1.5 items on our shelves per person in our service area. So for us, what that means is our service area is Juniata County, and there's roughly 25,000 people in the county. So 1.5 per 25,000 is roughly around 50,000 items that we have to have on our shelves. That requirement has actually been a point of contention in many larger library areas that have a large service area, which means they have to have a lot of items, and sometimes they have to keep items on their shelves that do not check out just to meet that standard. So we implore our politicians in Pennsylvania to reconsider those standards since a lot has changed over the years, especially with new digital items coming and becoming available. So, with all that said, when we do consider to remove items, or we often call it weeding items from our collection, we have to especially be careful not to just remove large amounts of items haphazardly and without really thinking it through. We have to be really careful of the number. Usually, if I'm going to weed a section, look at weeding items in a section, I will count how many items that we're going to take, and then I make sure that that's not going to really bring us under that standard and make sure that we can actually make up that if we are really taking a lot out. So I'll explain later on in the video how we go about doing that in a very delicate and methodical way. One of the first things we consider when we look at whether or not to remove an item is, has it circulated much recently? If an item hasn't checked out in 5 years, why is that? We'll go and look on the shelf. Maybe it's missing, and maybe that's why it hasn't checked out in 5 years. Or maybe it's just not really of interest, and I'll explain that. So we look at, definitely one of the first things we look at is it popular in the form of, has it circulated? We'll go and pull the item, and then we'll look at it. And as time passes, we might find items on the shelf that deteriorate or break down. Items just naturally break down over time by standing on their spine, being exposed to sunlight, and just being checked out. They can break down. When someone takes a book, they open and close them. That bends the spine. They can be damaged. Something can be spilled on it. Food can be spilled on it. It can be scratched, a torn page. Or with some books that are older, the paper quality or the spine is not very good, and it can start to fade or break down. We actually found one book that was returned to us. Somebody somehow dropped it and it fell out of their car and was run over by another car and brought to us. We had the tire tracks on the book. Some libraries actually use programs that can look at their collections and determine how many checkouts it takes for it to become grubby or kind of in a dirty or soiled state. And some libraries determine that to be 26 times that it has to be checked out. Nothing really could be worse than a patron going through our shelves and looking at items on our shelves and then the books being or items being ragged or damaged or unattractive. That's not a really appealing thing. So if we remove such items like that, it actually boosts our collection appeal. It gives more space for us to market and merchandise good-looking items, popular items, items of interest, and gives the space for that. Books can also deteriorate in another form that's not physical. Certain nonfiction books, such as those on medical topics or test prep, their information can become outdated in as soon as 5 years or less. The book might then be superseded by a newer edition, or it could be that we maybe can find a newer book to replace it. If we then look at and find books such as, like on our shelves, How to Succeed in Real Estate in the 1980s, or a title like how employment law is to be done and it doesn't mention family or medical leave, that's pretty much a slam dunk that we remove it or strongly consider removing it. This can also be true for guidebooks, such as a guidebook on travel or on product prices or studying for the SATs. These need to be continually updated as those things change. We also consider whether or not a book is historical or political. Is the author speaking on their personal opinion at the time, maybe in 1989, or does the item have some relevance today and maybe a historical reference? When it comes to weeding, we often err on the side of keeping an item that is more of a historical book as opposed to one that's written in a present tense. Do we need every title that tells us we need to be prepared and how to be prepared for Y2K? Or is there an item that's relevant and it's about the history of it and the world's concerns regarding that? As for memoirs, we have to understand their place in history as they describe a certain subject. And then we consider whether or not those are of interest anymore to someone. We're finding that a lot of books that were on American politics in the 1990s are now up for being weeded. Many were written by Bill Clinton and his impeachment, and they were very popular then. And if there's a really exceptional, well-written book on that, I will probably keep that one and maybe consider weeding ones that are not as good. And I have a feeling probably in 20 or 25 years, this same thing is going to happen with the books on the current political state. So then we decide when we weed, what do we do? We consider the number of items we remove so we don't remove too many. We consider whether or not there are other items in the collection that are on the same topic but are more current. We consider whether or not there's an item similar to it that's available in electronic form, such as an ebook. Many reference books have ebook versions in our database that are released each year with the new edition, and they're free access to patrons. So that would save us space from having to shelve each and every huge reference book and not having to buy a new one. That saves us money. We also then communicate with our staff when we're weeding. Our staff are on the front lines. They're the ones that are seeing customers' needs. We have to keep them in mind. They're the ones that are seeing items returned. They're putting them on the shelves. They're looking at them and seeing what their quality is. They're the ones who hear people asking about certain books, so they see if there's an interest. They see them being checked out. We keep in mind then that we are just making sure that we buy items and keep a collection that meets customer needs, not just building a collection just to have a great all-around collection. So if you ever Google stories of weeding in libraries, you will find a lot of big stories that are actually pretty interesting and can get rather nasty. If you don't weed and then communicate to the public and kind of some general talking points why you're weeding or how you're weeding, so that patrons don't come in and are then seeing empty shelves or really bare shelves, patrons will become confused, concerned, and they can even get mad. And we've found some stories over the years that have actually led to lawsuits, public battles with politicians or boards or councils, and different employees have actually been fired over doing this in a very poor way. People might come in one day and all of a sudden there are tens of thousands of items removed from the collection, and that takes staff off guard and gets them mad. It gets the public mad. And if people aren't informed and educated about your process, they won't understand it. That's all we have for today. Next time I want to talk about how we purchase ebooks, and the process for that is much different than when we purchase print titles. As always, thanks for watching, and ask us anything.